All right, and we're live. So, welcome everyone. Thank you again for coming. So, today's study, we're going to be continuing through chapter 7. Oops, hold on a second. Forgot about that. Gotta keep this. Okay, so we're going to go through chapter 7 of education. Well, we've been going through it, but chapter 7 is like put into different sections. It's on I forgot what the chapter was called, but it's on the men of God. So we've been going through Daniel, we've been through David, I believe, Elijah and Elisha. So now the next patriarch we're going through is Moses. This section is called Moses, Powerful Through Faith. If you would like to read along, I put the link to this section in the side chat, so you can go ahead and check that out for yourself so you can read along with us. If you have any issues opening that link or you need some help, feel free to let me know. And feel free to interject at any time. I don't mind that at all. Okay, so we're going to just go ahead and start. The starting reference is Education, page 61, paragraph 2. And it begins, "Younger than Joseph or Daniel was Moses when removed from the sheltering care of his childhood home. Yet already the same agencies that shaped their lives had molded his. Only 12 years did he spend with his Hebrew kindred, but during these years was laid the foundation of his greatness. It was laid by the hand of one little known to fame. Jochebed was a woman and a slave. Her lot in life was humble, her burden heavy, but through no other woman, save Mary of Nazareth, has the world received greater blessing. Knowing that her child must soon pass beyond her care to the guardianship of those who knew not God, she the more earnestly endeavored to link his soul with heaven. She sought to implant in his heart love and loyalty to God, and faithfully was the work accomplished. Those principles of truth that were the burden of his mother's teaching and the lesson of her life, no after influence could induce Moses to renounce." That's a very important statement right there. And welcome to whoever joined. We're going through Education, chapter 7, on the section of Moses, which is in the side chat, so feel free to read along with us. All right, we're continuing in page 62, paragraph 1. "From the humble home in Goshen, the son of Jochebed passed to the palace of the pharaohs, to the Egyptian princess by her to be welcomed as a loved and cherished son. In the schools of Egypt, Moses received the highest civil and military training. Of great personal attractions, noble in form and stature, of cultivated mind and princely bearing, and renowned as a military leader, he became the nation's pride. The king of Egypt was also a member of the priesthood, and Moses, though refusing to participate in the heathen worship, was initiated into all the mysteries of the Egyptian religion. Egypt at this time being still the most powerful and most highly civilized of the nations, Moses, as its prospective sovereign, was heir to the highest honors this world could bestow. But his was a nobler choice. For the honor of God and the deliverance of his downtrodden people, Moses sacrificed the honors of Egypt. Then, in a special sense, God undertook his training. Not yet was Moses prepared for his life work. He had yet to learn the lesson of dependence upon divine power. He had mistaken God's purpose. It was his hope to deliver Israel by force of arms. For this he risked all and failed. In defeat and disappointment, he became a fugitive and exile in a strange land. In the wilds of Midian, Moses spent 40 years as a keeper of sheep. Apparently cut off forever from his life's mission, he was receiving the discipline essential for its fulfillment. Wisdom to govern an ignorant and undisciplined multitude must be gained through self-mastery. In the care of the sheep and the tender lambs, he must obtain the experience that would make him faithful. Long-suffering shepherd to Israel. That he might become a representative of God, he must learn of him. The influences that had surrounded him in Egypt, the affection of his foster mother, his own position as the grandson of the king, the luxury and vice that allured in 10,000 forms, the refinement, the subtlety, and the mysticism of a false religion, had made an impression on his mind and character. In the stern simplicity of the wilderness, all this disappeared. That's interesting. I'm going to go back to that later. Amidst the solemn majesty of the mountain solitudes, Moses was alone with God. Everywhere the Creator's name was written. Moses seemed to stand in his presence and to be overshadowed by his power. Here his self-sufficiency was swept away. In the presence of the Infinite One, he realized how weak, how inefficient, how short-sighted is man. Here Moses gained that which went with him throughout the years of his toilsome care and burdened life, a sense of the personal presence of the Divine One. Not merely did he look down the ages for Christ to be made manifest in the flesh, he saw Christ accompanying the host of Israel in all their travels. When misunderstood and misrepresented, when called to bear reproach and insult, to face danger and death, he was able to endure as seeing him who is invisible. Hebrews 11:27. Moses did not merely think of God, he saw him. God was the constant vision before him. Never did he lose sight of his face. To Moses, faith was no guesswork, it was a reality. He believed that God ruled his life in particular, and in all its details he acknowledged him. For strength to withstand every temptation, he trusted in him. The great work assigned him he desired to make in the highest degree successful, and he placed his whole dependence upon divine power. He felt his need of help, asked for it, and by faith grasped it, and in the assurance of sustaining strength went forward. Such was the experience that Moses gained by his 40 years of training in the desert. To impart such an experience, infinite wisdom counted not the period too long or the price too great. The results of that training, of the lessons there taught, are bound up not only with the history of Israel, but with all which from that day to this has told for the world's progress. The highest testimony to the greatness of Moses, the judgment passed upon his life by inspiration, is, "There arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." Deuteronomy 34, verse 10. And that is this section on Moses. So, there is a lot here. Though it was a little shorter than the one that we went through previously, there is a lot here. There's a lot of precious lessons here. There are some things that caught my eye in particular. But before I do, does anyone have any thoughts or anything that came to their mind while reading? Yes, it was a very good passage, for sure. Let me see if I can find the quote that I wanted to go back to. Okay, I see there's someone typing, so I'm just gonna hold up on that. Again, if anyone else wants to interject or share their thoughts, feel free to do so. Evelyn says, even if it feels like we are spinning our wheels, so to speak, God still has a plan for us. Absolutely. Yeah, because it's never just us that gets us to where we need to go. In fact, it's not us at all that gets us to where we need to go. You just cooperate, God will redirect you to where you need to be. Absolutely. You can't rely on yourself. And what's interesting is that Moses's issue, I guess you could say, was self-dependence. You know, his character was the opposite of what God needed, in a sense, to help him deliver the children of Israel out of Egypt. It was that self-dependence. And what's interesting is that, in a way, that's exactly what the children of Israel's issue was as well, was God was trying so hard to get them to depend on him. I think this is just the issue with humanity in a nutshell, is that we try to depend on our own strength so much. I need to do this. I need to stop doing this. I need to stop sinning, which you should, but we depend on our own strength too much. And it's really subtle when that happens, because you think you're praying and then you're like, well, God, why isn't this helping, or why am I not changing, and then you just get stuck into a rut. You get into this hamster wheel and you're like, well, I guess this isn't for me because it's not working, when you were trying to do it all yourself. But it was through faith that Moses, and then through the training that God gave him, which is part of this plan of true education, which we'll go back to, that got him to where he needed to be, and it was just that self-dependence that needed pretty much just that to go away. Giselle says, I like how in the beginning it highlighted the importance of the mother's role, even though a short time she helped lay the foundation. Absolutely. The foundation. That is what's the most important thing about it. And one thing I will say about that, I'm glad you brought that up, because so Moses' mother, real mother, laid the foundation. He didn't, where was it? In page 62, paragraph 1, it says that Moses, though refusing to participate in the heathen worship, was initiated into all the mysteries of the Egyptian religion. So he knew all the mysticism, all the, I guess, mythology, if you want to call it. He knew all of that stuff, but he didn't participate in it because of his foundation that was laid while he was a child, before entering into the palaces of Egypt. But that had surrounded him in Egypt, the affection of his foster mother, his own position as the grandson of the king, the luxury and vice that allured in 10,000 forms, the refinement, the subtlety, and the mysticism of a false religion, had made an impression on his mind and character. In the stern simplicity of the wilderness, all this disappeared. Something that I find with some people that I talk to that might not understand the plan of true education, whether they're Christian or not, they might make the argument that, well, as long as you know the Bible and you're Christian, it's okay to go to a public school, or it's okay to live in the city, or whatever the case may be, because just don't participate, or like it's not going to affect you if you're Christian. I guess somehow that shields you from that. But even though Moses had that foundation, it still affected him. in some way or another, right? It's not that Moses' mother failed in his education or in laying his foundation, but no matter what you surround yourself with is going to influence you in one way or another. It's subtle, you might not think that it is, but in the stern simplicity of the wilderness, in the place where God wanted him to be for 40 years, all of that disappeared. And you just can't argue with God's plan. It's like so perfect. The results will happen if you do it the way he ordered them to be. I mean, he created you. I would assume that God knows what's best for us, what environment is best for us, and what's going to harm us and what's not going to harm us. But I just thought that was a very interesting aspect in this section here. So does anyone else have any other thoughts that they'd like to share? Okay, so I guess I could ask a quick question here that maybe we can all kind of answer in our own way. But as we're going through, I see some are typing, so feel free to continue so, but I'm just going to post the question. As we're going through just this chapter alone so far, just with what we have been reading, what are the patterns that we're seeing with education? What is the foundation that Moses' mother laid for Moses in his education, with David, with Daniel, with Elisha? What are the patterns that we're seeing in their upbringing that we can apply to ourselves in this day and age? Giselle says it's almost reoccurring even in our lives that God takes us into a wilderness period to draw us closer to him, connecting them with heaven, says Abilene. Yeah, so God, in one way or another, God is going to put us in a wilderness period. Absolutely. That's kind of like a given, like it's going to happen. And when we understand that, because sometimes you might not know that you're going through that kind of period, whether it's you're physically doing it or literally doing it, or spiritually doing it, it helps to know that God is going to put you in that position. If you're prepared for it, it'll help you go through it much easier, help you to actively see the lessons that God is trying to teach you. I know for myself, I'm still kind of going through that period, but looking back, understanding that God is just going to keep you there until you learn the lesson, like he kept Israel there for 40 years as well. If they even got the lesson, it's going to happen. And it's really helpful to understand that you're going through that, or that you're sometime in the future, if you haven't gone through it yet, it's going to happen. But yes, so back to the question. So far, what we've been reading about these great men, David, Daniel, Elisha, Moses, as we're going through now, what are the patterns that we're seeing that God, whether God taught it directly to them or their family, in their upbringing, what are the patterns or the lessons that we're seeing here that we can apply to ourselves as well? Because remember, in chapter 1, or was it chapter 1? I think it was chapter 1. The plan doesn't change. The circumstances may be different, but she says the plan is always the same. Giselle says nature was a main teacher for their education. Absolutely. That's very key. Nature was a main teacher. We see that in the life of Elisha, David, Daniel. Any other pattern or any other lesson that we see reoccurring? Giselle said they had to humble themselves. Absolutely. Oh, you're fine, I believe. This is also recorded if you're having a hard time hearing, so yeah, don't worry about that. In connection with humbling, one thing that I notice is like with the care of animals. I also see that as a way to humble yourself. It's kind of like, how do I say this in the correct way? Because having animals, I've taken care of chickens, and then of course I have another pet, and it's learning to put their needs, because they're just animals, they don't know any better, but putting their needs before yours. Sometimes you got to wake up early in the morning, you want to sleep, but you have animals to take care of because they can't take care of themselves. And it's just like, at first it's just so hard, because like, why? Like, you think that like, they could take care of themselves, they can find their own food, but they're an entrustment from the Lord, and it can be a humbling experience. You got to do things that you don't want to do. You learn patience, you learn a lot of patience, because I one lesson that I can know for sure is like, this is how God sees us. Whenever I'm raising more baby chicks, so whenever I see them running around, I'm trying to catch them, put them in a safe place. I don't want them running around everywhere because they could get hurt. And they just don't listen. They will not listen, and it's so hard. Sometimes you gotta just gotta be a little bit rough with them, in the sense that like, you gotta run after them, you gotta pick them up. Sometimes it's just hard. And it's like, wow, I'm pretty sure God feels the same way about us. We're over here running around here on earth doing things we're not supposed to. And it really teaches you compassion, it teaches you patience, it teaches you compassion with other people. But that's one of the lessons I learned, and I think that's a big reason why God wants us taking care of animals too, as part of our education. If you have that opportunity to do that, there's a lot of learning experience. Yes, Marley agrees. Absolutely. Evelyn gets it. Yes. All right, anything else, and then we could probably close this off. Any other lessons? Any other particular patterns or example that we should be following, that God had these men to follow in order to be where they are or were? You got country living, you have being out in nature, you have agriculture, taking care of animals. Yes, Giselle says they had to fully rely on God. All of that, all of those things together teach you dependence on God. Like, right now we're doing gardening. Just because you put the seed in the ground and you water it doesn't mean it's guaranteed that it's going to grow. It's total dependence on God. God is the one that makes it grow, and he is the power behind all of that. He is the power that helps you see the lessons in nature, that helps you see the lessons while taking care of animals, while being in the country, but while being productive. Because anyone can just go out there and do work, right? Can do hard work, but when you have that dependence on God, knowing why you're doing it, it makes all the difference. That's how you develop and grow as a Christian. And God's way is the best way. The way he did it with Moses, though it might seem ridiculous in the sense that, like, taking care of sheep for 40 years, you're doing the same thing every day. You're doing the same thing every day. And that's one of the things that really irked me during my experience, I guess, wilderness experience, was doing the same thing every day. I could not stand it. And I was so frustrated. I'm like, why am I even here? Why am I even doing this? But when you understand why, you don't mind anymore. You don't mind because you know the higher purpose of why you're doing it and why it's important. And in turn, you tell others about it. You grow, and then you pass it on to someone else, and the blessing just grows and grows. Then once you understand the lesson that he's trying to teach you, God's going to be like, okay, you learned that lesson, we're going to go on to the next one. So if you feel like you're in the same spot, might feel like you've been here for 40 years doing the same thing, you probably still need a lesson to be learned here, and you shouldn't be discouraged. You shouldn't be discouraged because God will make it happen. I was reading the story of Ruth yesterday, actually, and there was a lot of heartbreak in that book, at least in the beginning, and it's like, wow, that having your husband die, your sons die for Naomi, there's famine in the land, how discouraging is that? And especially during that time, Israel was just all over the place. They were just out of it. And how discouraging that must have felt for Ruth, for Naomi, but God made it work out so perfectly. His purpose is always going to work out if you depend on him, if you trust in him, do as he has commanded for our own good. It's going to work out, and Ruth became part of the line of Christ, right? So God's plan is perfect. If I've learned anything in my Christian experience, is that God is perfect, and no one, no powers, no entities, nothing is going to get in the way of what he has for you, what he has for your family, your friends, your associations with others, all of that. But yes, so I digress. I'm probably talking too much. So yeah, is there any other final thoughts before we close off? Alrighty, so we're gonna go ahead. Yep,